Welcome, Impact Church, to Friday. Brianna did one last week, and I'm coming at you this week with a Focus Friday. And since it's a video, maybe you're not watching it on Friday, maybe it's Saturday, maybe it's Sunday, and you're doing some catch-up. But for a second, why don't we just think in our minds and get into that idea that it's Friday so that we can continue on with this video. It's the perspective of that it's Friday, because this month, our prayer theme is perspective, all right? Why do we need perspective? Why is it important, right? Perspective is important because we are continually learning, continually growing, and continually getting closer to God. So the closer we get to God, our perspective has to change. It can't stay the same, because the more that we know God, the more that we see Him, the more that we think like Him, the more our perspective is going to change and has to change. And the perspective that we're coming at with this week is the fact that God is always working, even when we don't see it. In Joshua 3, the Israelites are getting ready to cross the Jordan River, and they've been camped there for 3 days at this point. And so God says this to Joshua in Joshua 3, verse 8. It says, "Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." It later says the stream was cut off and the water stood up like walls, and that they walked through on dry ground. So there's a few things we want to take away from this verse, because I believe God has put everything in there on purpose. So the first thing is that they had to wait 3 days. They got there first, and they were told to just camp out and wait. They could see the Jordan. They knew what they were supposed to be going to, but they had to have patience and listen to God's complete direction. Number two is they got wet. The verse specifically says that tell them to go and stand in the river. So they were standing in the river before anything actually happened here. Number three is that they crossed on dry ground. Even though they got wet, they still crossed on dry ground, every single one of them. And that's just by obedience, following exactly what God told them to do, and the provision that God promised them, right? And number four is that the presence of the Lord went before them. Nothing happened until the Ark of the Covenant showed up and was there, and the people standing in the water were there. People carrying it were standing in the water. So there's those four things we want to take away from that, because we need to be willing to step in the water. Maybe if we don't see anything happening yet, we need to still be willing to get a little wet, because we believe and know that God is working even when we don't see it. They had to have the perspective that God would be working upstream to stop the water's flow, to stand it up and halt it the way He said He would, and that they would cross on dry ground because God was working upstream even if they didn't see it. If you think of the testimonies that you heard, if you think of your favorite testimony, often those are someone sowing a seed, so to speak, and testimony part one comes full circle, comes back around to them, and you hear about this a certain amount of time later. Those testimonies are awesome. But for every testimony like that, people have 10 more testimonies that they haven't seen the results of yet. If you think of big speakers that have these testimonies, they have 10 more testimonies that they have not seen the results of yet, but they have sown and they have been participating in, and they've done exactly what God told them to do in that instance, because they believe and we believe that God is working in other people's lives even if we don't see it. Right? So Ananias is a really good example of this. Saul was murdering Christians at the time. He gets encounter with Jesus, blinded, knocked off his horse. Other people with him are freaked out. He's blind at this point. And God comes to Ananias, and he's just like, I have this guy. I need him for my big plan. I'm going to write this book. And he didn't exactly say that, but you can get the picture if you read on. And Ananias kind of comes back with the, well, are you sure? You sure about this? I mean, if you look at the evidence, he's killing Christians. I'm a Christian. If he is going to see, the first thing he's going to see is me, a Christian, and go berserk and try and kill me. Actually, no. Ananias knows and believes that God is working in his life. And so despite the history and despite the circumstance, he goes and prays for Saul. And Saul turns into Paul, and there's a whole New Testament to, rest of the New Testament to kind of back that up and what Paul continued to go on and do. Right? But Ananias knew that God was working in Saul's life. Seeds planted take watering to grow. You don't see them growing immediately, but seeds planted take watering to grow. I like the song Waymaker, where it has the lyrics that says, even when I don't feel like it, you're working. Even when I don't see you working, you never stop working. And the real goal of this it's the goal of this perspective, and it's perspective we need in North America because this cripples churches and Christians everywhere, is that we need to understand that God is working in someone else's life, and the weight of the gospel is not on us exclusively. Jesus died for their sins. Sometimes people just get caught up with, I can't take one conversation and take my atheist friend and save them, but that's okay. Jesus is working in their life, and we need to know and believe that God is working in their life and has his eye on them and has his finger on them and is chasing them, and it's our responsibility to share with them. Suddenly that becomes a privilege. Suddenly you can be part of something in someone else's life instead of feeling the weight of that. And I hope that encourages you in this next season to have the perspective that no matter your circumstance, no matter the situation, no matter the history, God is working in your life when you don't see it and on other people's lives, even though we don't see it yet. Thanks and be blessed. Have a good night.